Just like anyone else, I had a lot of worries before buying my Ally X. Since this is my very first handheld gaming PC, I was doubtful about its performance, build quality, and I wasn't even sure if such a device was the right choice for me. But now that I had it for 3 months, I'm finally ready to talk about it. Also, this video took me a lot of time to film, so please smash like, subscribe, and without further ado, let's jump right in. So the number one reason why I chose this handheld instead of a Steam Deck or a Nintendo Switch is that the Ally X runs Windows 11, which gives me access to every single game launcher, including Xbox, Steam, whatever this blue thing is, Epic Games, you name it. Not to mention that Windows also allows me to play games with pesky anti-cheat mechanisms such as Call of Duty, Battlefield 6 or Rainbow Six Siege, which is not an option with the Steam Deck or the Nintendo Switch. But still, the fact that the Ally X is technically just a beefed up Xbox controller with a 7-inch touchscreen made me anxiously worried because I did not know whether it would actually run my games on a level where they are enjoyable to play, or it would just simply run them on a level where everything looks like I was playing Minecraft. But now, after 3 months, I'm happy to say that for gaming, the Xbox Ally X is simply fantastic because it can easily run even the most demanding AAA titles without a single frame drop, which is very impressive. On top of that, the handling of the machine also feels amazing. The grip is comfy to hold, and the joystick/button layout feels natural and very intuitive. The number one game that I played the most throughout these 3 months was Warhammer Space Marine 2, and the way this tiny device handled this intense action shooter simply blew me away. Throughout the campaign, I've never seen my frame rate below 60 FPS, even though I was running through ginormous maps with crazy explosions and unending hordes of enemies. But the real surprise hit me when my Ally X performed even better in multiplayer, since this game mode had smaller maps with much fewer enemies, which kept my FPS between 90 and 120 frames per second. And strangely enough, I've never had a moment when I felt at a disadvantage because I was competing from a handheld PC instead of a full-size gaming rig. To be honest with you, I felt the exact opposite, because instead of sitting at my desk all day, I could play from my bed or my couch, which made gaming much more comfortable, so it took me way less effort to stay focused on an objective, and I very often came out as a top player, even though I'm a complete noob. And by complete noob I mean that I haven't played a single video game in years, and I've never even held an Xbox controller in my entire life. So the only reason why I could play Warhammer on a competitive level and clap everyone's butt cheeks is that the Ally X is incredibly easy to use. Probably my favorite feature is the built-in gyroscope, which allows me to look around and aim by moving the device itself instead of just relying on the joysticks. Plus, this gyro also makes shooting in video games an incredibly fun and immersive experience, as I can use my natural motions and fight my enemies by instinctively turning my body towards them, just like I would do it in real life. And honestly speaking, I really enjoyed playing Warhammer on the Ally X, because it's a true testosterone-infused power trip that every guy should try. I mean, fighting for Space King by going toe-to-toe with gigantic space monsters and tearing their limbs off with my bare hands is just the coolest shit ever. Plus, Space Marine 2 also has a class that literally fights like Batman. I mean, Batman! Because he has a grappling hook which he can shoot at his enemies and then smash their faces with a flying kick. When it comes to other games, I also tried this weird rabbit thing that everybody plays nowadays, and I lasted for about 5 minutes because I found it boring as hell. But I'm also very proud that I lasted for a whole 5 minutes, since this amount of time is a lot more than what I usually spend with my girlfriend. But anyways, the most magical experience came, because my girlfriend didn't, after I dusted off my Steam library and installed some old classics like Fallout 4 or Borderlands 2, because I remember that back in the days I had to custom build an expensive, large and heavy gaming computer to run these games. But the fact that now I can play them on a handheld device is just simply crazy. In Borderlands 2, my FPS counter never really went under 120 frames per sec, even though some boss fights like the Wolf Warrior are graphically very intense. And this surprisingly high performance means that the Ally X is essentially a pocketable powerhouse, which is great for nostalgia, because it allows me to play my all-time favorites in a way that I previously never imagined. For example, I mostly played Borderlands on a sandy beach in Phuket, Thailand, sitting on a towel while slurping my coconut smoothie, and I had a lot of fun giggling at all the weird side quests because, despite its age, Borderlands 2 is still one of the funniest games.
Let me assure you that, oh my god, shoot me in the goddamn face! What are you waiting for? Want them naked? Yes!
On top of everything, the Ally X could also sustain this incredible frame rate after I plugged it into a television, which literally turned it into a fully capable gaming console, and then later I also plugged it into a monitor when it functioned much more like a traditional gaming PC, because I could use it with a keyboard and a mouse. So when it comes to gaming, the Ally X genuinely gives me the impression that handheld technology finally arrived to the point where it can potentially replace full-size computers, especially for those people who'd like to rediscover some old-school gems and play them in a brand new way. Fallout 4, for example, is yet another offline masterpiece. This story takes place in a nuclear wasteland, where you can build settlements and fight your enemies in power armor, and I really enjoyed playing this game right next to my rooftop swimming pool in Malaysia. So, the combination of portability and high performance is hands down the best perk of the Ally X, and to me personally, this level of freedom makes handheld gaming so convenient that I'll probably never play games on a desktop PC or on a laptop ever again, because now I don't have to choose gaming over chilling by my swimming pool, or going to the beach, or getting on an airplane, and still I can enjoy high quality graphics without being locked up in a dark room. The hardware Asus cherry-picked for the Ally X is definitely impressive, not only because it's light and small, but also because it can actually outperform most modern gaming PCs that other people use. And I'm not really a benchmark guy, so the way I know this is that in multiplayer I often get a message that I'm waiting for my battle brothers to load in. So the SSD in this machine is definitely fast enough, and I also really like that it comes with 1TB of storage out of the box, especially since most modern games are extremely large. Call of Duty, for example, just by itself requires almost 400GB to install, which is absolutely insane. And also the fact that the Ally X comes with 24GB of RAM is also very generous, especially in this economy when PC memory sticks can cost as much as this entire machine. Having these 24GB of RAM on board out of the box also makes the Ally X future-proof, and I'm happy to know that I won't have to change any parts to keep this thing in the game. Pun intended. My other favorite hardware-related thing about the Ally X is the amazing audio quality, because the speakers sound much nicer compared to my other gadgets. So I very often use my Ally X just for music and podcasts, because the larger screen and louder speakers make this a superior pick over my iPhone.
I never went to the island, I never met any women.
But now that I hype this thing up, I should also give it some genuine criticism, because even though I love my Ally X, it is definitely far from perfect. The display, for example, is something that most people like complaining about because it's not OLED. So let me talk about this one first, because I have a very unique take on this issue. When it comes to me personally, I find it very annoying that nowadays everyone is obsessed with OLED, and they have a hysterical reaction when a screen is just quote-unquote traditional IPS. However, at the same time, everyone ignores the biggest cons of OLED technology. First and foremost, most OLED screens are less sharp than this IPS panel, which is a big deal on a device that we are supposed to hold close to our faces. On top of that, static images can easily burn into OLED displays, which happened to every single iPhone Pro I've used over the years, as they had the camera's record button burned into their screens, which made them look very ugly. And last but not least, usually, OLED also has low peak brightness, which is very counterproductive for a screen that I like using on beaches, airports or rooftops. So even though it is a big turnoff for a lot of people, I'm happy that the Ally X comes with a traditional IPS display instead of OLED, and also this 7-inch touchscreen has gorgeous colors. It is extremely sharp. It comes with an amazing peak brightness, a quick response time and a 120Hz refresh rate, so it is hands down perfect for outdoors gaming. The only improvement I see for this screen would be thinner bezels, because right now it looks kinda boxy, not gonna lie, and this frame could easily accept a display that is at least 10% bigger. Another thing that most people dislike about the Ally X is the build quality, and here I can actually agree with the critics. I know a large number of users who had to return their Ally X's because their models had issues with resonating speakers, overheating SD card readers, and malfunctioning gyroscopes. Plus, I also heard a lot of cases about broken joysticks and buttons too. Fortunately for me, I did not experience any of these issues, which is great news, because as a full-time traveler, returning this thing or getting it fixed would have been a big pain in the ass. However, I still have problems with the chassis and some of the cheap injection molded parts. In itself, the use of this material would not be an issue because most handheld devices are made of plastic, and Asus also did a great job at making it look fancy. On the front we got this cool laser engraved ROG pattern and some colorful LED rings. On the back we got a nice rainbow inlay, engravings and well-designed cutouts. Meanwhile, the grip has a very comfy texture that reminds me of the P-Apply scales of my favorite pocket knives. But if we take a close look, this texturing is actually made of super tiny ROG letters. With all that said, I definitely appreciate all these cool little details because aesthetically they make the Ally X look very nice. But as soon as I pick this thing up and start using it, I immediately feel that something is off, because the plastic Asus used is incredibly flimsy. I can easily bend the back cover by simply touching it with one of my fingers, and every time I wrap my hands around the grip, the whole chassis starts squeaking very loudly. So I'd really appreciate it if on top of the fancy looks, Asus would also make the Ally X more solid. And I'm saying this because the performance definitely feels incredible. It is leading the whole industry, but the poor build quality takes away from the awesomeness of this small and powerful machine. On top of the build quality, my other complaint to Asus is the way they are selling the Ally X, and by this I mostly mean that they should improve the set of accessories they put in the box.
What's in the box?
Just like the device itself, the packaging also looks very nice, and I'll totally keep it around as a decoration, but its content is genuinely not that useful. We just got a poorly designed charger and a gimmicky cardboard desk stand, meaning that Asus did not even include a carry case at all whatsoever.
No!
This kinda pisses me off, and in my opinion, selling a handheld PC without a carry case should be absolutely illegal. Asus probably did this on purpose because they want us to buy their official carry case for an extra $70, which in my opinion is insanely overpriced. But my real issue here is that, according to Asus's website, the official carry case is either out of stock or straight up unavailable in most countries. And by selling the Ally X without this accessory, Asus seriously screwed many of their customers, because the whole point of having a portable gaming device is to have it on the go, so not giving us the accessory that would allow this makes zero sense. With all that said, instead of a carry case, we got an unexpected accessory in the form of this cardboard desk stand. And don't get me wrong, I genuinely appreciate Asus giving us something that can hold the device. It comes in handy when I use my Ally X as a desktop computer hooked up to a monitor because it allows easy access to the USB ports and to the built-in SD card reader. But ever since this stand is made of paper, I don't think it's a great option for traveling, because it can get squished easily inside my luggage. So in my opinion, it would have been a much better idea to make this with injection molded rubber or silicone instead, because those materials would have been cheap and easy to manufacture, but they would have been a lot more durable. And as you probably guessed, I also dislike the charger that comes with the Ally X, because it's essentially just a cheap, generic laptop charger. My main issue with this design is that the USB-C cable cannot detach from the adapter, and the adapter is also useless without its very own dedicated power cord. So instead of the original charger, I carry my Ally X with this low-profile third-party adapter that can separate from the USB cable. Having a solution like this out of the box would have been a huge deal from Asus, because unlike the original charger, this one can actually fit inside the carry case, which makes my life a lot easier. Plus, of course, the detachable data cable also has a huge practical advantage, because it allows me to connect this handheld Windows computer to other devices like my DJI Flip drone or my unbreakable action camera, to curate their videos and then work with their footage.
Bro, you can't even make this shit up. This is so bumpy.
However, my complaints about these accessories are not true deal breakers, as they can be resolved with a quick shopping spree on Amazon. And at the end of the day, Asus did a pretty good job with the Ally X, because the hardware inside this machine is simply fantastic, and to me personally, this is all that matters. Also, my criticism of Microsoft is a lot more severe anyway, and this is the part where using the Ally X starts becoming painful, because unlike Asus, Microsoft did a sloppy job, unfortunately. I don't know whether it was out of laziness or just sheer incompetence, but the software on this device is seriously messed up. If you don't live under a rock, you probably heard that pretty much everyone hates Windows 11 and how it's losing users every day. But to quickly sum it up for the sake of this video, with this new operating system, Microsoft forces us to download unending software updates that are crashing computers across the industry, which also includes the Ally X. And here I'm not talking about decreased FPS caused by the bloatware or unnecessary AI features that make no sense. Here I'm talking about serious cases when the Ally X simply dies and refuses to turn back on. Basically, ever since I got it, I had to fight 3 types of issues on a daily basis. The first and most serious one is when a Windows update makes me lose access to my USB ports, which is the only way to charge the battery. Without these, the device simply refuses to finish the update and ends up in a loop where the battery is draining because the update is running, but the update cannot finish running because the battery is draining. Please, anyone, make this make sense. The second issue, which is the most common one out of the 3, is when the Ally X keeps restarting itself endlessly because Windows needs to repair itself after finishing an update. However, instead of repairing itself and then starting up, this problem happens in a loop, and my Ally X refuses to boot up, sometimes for literal hours. And then the third type of issue, still ongoing by the way, is when my device cannot wake up after I leave it in Windows 11's sleep mode, and I either have to kiss her lips like in a Disney movie, or press down the power button for 15 seconds to perform a so-called forced reset, and then boot up the whole system all over again. On top of Windows 11, the Ally X also has big problems with other Microsoft services, and I will respect your time by not listing all of them. But still, I have to talk about my issues with the Xbox Game Launcher, because that's probably the #1 service that you'd like to use when you purchase a machine like this. So, in a nutshell, the Xbox Game Launcher has constant glitches, including this error window that can only be fixed by restarting not just the app, but also the device itself. And the launcher is also unable to download certain games like Call of Duty, which gets an error message every time I try to install it. Maybe if Bill Gates spent less time on Epstein Island and more time on development, the situation would be better. But honestly speaking, it is pretty messed up that Microsoft released this device and it cannot run video games developed also by Microsoft, because I cannot download them through a game launcher that is also owned by Microsoft. If the Ally X had similar issues with Steam or the Epic Game Launcher, I would say fine. There had to be a miscommunication between a couple of different companies, but the truth is that on this machine every third-party app and game runs flawlessly, and all issues I ran into were caused by none other than Microsoft. And as I mentioned earlier, I skipped out on many of these, so if you'd like to hear about every problem that Windows has besides gaming, I already posted a video where I talk about them in greater detail. So if you wanna know how deep this rabbit hole actually is, you should click on this card and watch my previous upload. Thank you for sticking around all the way, and I'll see you in the next one.